Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Today on the show, we are going to talk about the 2012 Republican New Hampshire primary. I'll also do my first official 2020 election endorsement. But before that, we are going to talk a little bit about a film I watched the other night called Dirty Harry. Perhaps you've heard of it. I'll do a quick recap and review of this film. I hadn't seen it in years, but I think it might be a film some of you may want to rewatch. So given that today's show is political in nature, I'm just going to go ahead and encourage you all to pop over to the website of one of your favorite political candidates for this election or any election in the future. It can actually be kind of fun sometimes to just jump into the political process for the fun of it and check it out. All right, let's start the show. Okay, our first topic today is the 1971 film Dirty Harry. This movie is directed by Don Siegel, starring the great Clint Eastwood. It's a neo-noir crime thriller based roughly on the Zodiac killings in the Bay Area in California back in the 1960s. This is a movie that was quite controversial when it came out. It deals with themes of police brutality, law enforcement, torture, and the tough ethical choices we have to make when fighting crime. Clint Eastwood here is playing Detective Harry Callahan. He's just a rough and tumble, no-nonsense cop. But what really struck me upon rewatching this movie a couple nights ago was just how thoughtful the filmmaking is. The director, Don Siegel, goes way back. He's credited as a montage director in the 1942 classic Casablanca. He then went on to direct a number of film noir, detective classics, perhaps the most well-known being The Big Steal with Robert Mitchum. He also directed a number of westerns, like Two Mules for Sister Sarah, but he really established himself as a neo-noir crime thriller director in the 1970s. So going back a few years, in 1968, he directed a film called Madigan. Well, this is his first foray into this crime thriller genre, this dark, gritty 70s style. But 1971 was a really big year for him. He directed Dirty Harry, of course, which we're talking about, but also a film called The Beguiled, which was recently remade by Sofia Coppola about a Civil War soldier who's taken in by a house full of Southern women. It's just a really psychedelic, kind of trippy, a thriller horror film. So I think this is a point in Don Siegel's career where he's really peaking and making these films that he wants to make. We're just talking about a really simple story, a murderer on the loose, a hard-nosed cop trying to track him down. But Siegel just does a really good job of taking a different approach to a lot of different shots. He just really uses the camera in weird ways to make the film more tense, more riveting, and more interesting. There's one particular scene where Dirty Harry is chasing this suspected murderer into a football stadium. There's a gentleman there that flips on the lights as Detective Callahan takes him down with a shot to the leg. He approaches the suspect and decides to torture him to find out where he has stashed a girl who could possibly die soon. But Siegel decides to do this really long pullback shot that starts up close on these two, with this captive psychopath being tortured for vital information. He just kind of pulls back, further and further until eventually you're up in the clouds and you just see this football stadium illuminated. So I highly recommend going back and watching Dirty Harry if you haven't seen it in a while. It's a very violent film. It's very hard to watch. It's certainly not for kids, but check it out. It's streaming on the internet. So torture is not something I enjoy talking about. It's a very, very difficult thing for me. But speaking of torture, Rick Santorum. This picture here was taken during the 2012 Republican presidential primary in New Hampshire at a community center in Salem, New Hampshire, not Salem, Massachusetts. My friend and I had a day off, so we decided to pop up to New Hampshire from Boston to pop into some of these town halls and see some of these candidates while they were campaigning. We're both Democrats, but just kind of thought this would be something fun to do on a day off on a cold January day. Initially, we wanted to make it up there for the 7:30 a.m. Ron Paul pancake breakfast outside of Nashua, New Hampshire, but we just missed it by a hair. We basically saw his campaign bus driving away as we were pulling into that restaurant parking lot. So we cut our losses and grabbed a coffee and just popped over to Salem, New Hampshire. So it was cool. You know, I think the highlight of that Rick Santorum stop was running into Brett Baer in the bathroom. My buddy Brent actually took a leak right next to him. Think of the imposing stature of Brett Baer standing at that urinal next to you. Quite a memory. After that, we popped over to Dover, New Hampshire, which is just about half hour north of Portsmouth. Another candidate, John Huntsman Jr., was having coffee and pastries at a cafe there in town. So we popped into that. It was jam-packed, really, really full. But he stepped outside and was greeted by a goat in the streets of Dover, New Hampshire. Seemed like a great endorsement. And he was by far the most interesting Republican nominee to me in that election. Were I a Republican, I would have voted for him. He has a very interesting resume. His father, John Huntsman Sr., was a very successful business owner and a philanthropist, donated lots of money for cancer researches, donated a bunch of money to Armenia for rebuilding after a big earthquake back in the late 1980s. Interesting guy. And his son, John Huntsman Jr. here, was also a very successful businessman and philanthropist. He has worked for every presidential administration since Ronald Reagan. He served one term as the governor of Utah. During that time, Utah was rated the best managed state in the United States. He served as the ambassador to China under Barack Obama. He served as the ambassador to Russia under Donald Trump. And now he is running again to be the governor of Utah. With that in mind, we here at The Adams Show are going to make our first endorsement for the 2020 election. We are officially endorsing John Huntsman Jr. for governor of Utah. All right, but first off, if you are a Republican voter in Utah, you have until June 19th to register for the Republican primary there. The election is going to be held on June 20th. It will be entirely mail-in this year. The state of Utah has decided to go that way because of the coronavirus. But please don't wait until June 19th to register to vote. When I went down to get a title for my car at the courthouse here in Washington State on Election Day, there was a big, big line of people who were looking to register and get their ballots and vote. Now, everyone in this line looked like a college-age Bernie Sanders supporter, and the chatter that I overheard coming from the line confirmed this. So yeah, nothing screams disenfranchised to me like a long line of voters registering on Election Day, right? So in the future, maybe let's plan ahead. This is an election. It's not a 6-page essay on postmodern feminist theory. Okay, so I know you Republicans are a little more organized than these cats, but yeah, June 19th is the last day to register. Utah, John Huntsman Jr. Let's do it. Anyway. Where were we? Dover, New Hampshire. John Huntsman, yeah. Grabbed another coffee, popped back in the car, and headed back towards Nashua. It was getting pretty late at this point, so once we got back to Nashua, we grabbed some dinner, had a couple beers, and then we popped over to the Newt Gingrich Town Hall. And I gotta say, that's not how you want to end your night or your day. Newt Gingrich at this point and his wife up there were just tedious to listen to, going on and on and on. They were just blown out by the lighting at that venue. Our heads all started to hurt about an hour into it. Newt Gingrich was actually a front runner at the beginning of this primary, but his just complete lack of charisma, I think, doomed him. But all in all, that was a really, really fun day. If there's ever a primary going on near you or in your state, I highly recommend taking part. Just going and checking it out, even if it's not your political party. By the way, Mitt Romney ended up winning that 2012 New Hampshire Republican primary, and he went on to win the nomination too. And that's going to do it for today. Please try to have a relaxing evening. Stay safe, stay sane, and we will see you tomorrow.